Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. All right, hey friends, and welcome back to Pour and Explore, the podcast where we sip, savor, and get a little wanderlusty together. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, sommelier travel enthusiast, and your personal host on this wine journey that I love so much. Today's episode is one of those conversations that feels like kismet to me. I'm joined today by someone whose passion for travel, wine, and curating once-in-a-lifetime experiences is absolutely contagious. Gail Sherman is the founder of Wine Lovers Travel, and I am thrilled to be co-hosting a very special trip with her next March, and we're going to call it the Swirl Through Australia tour. I'm so excited. It's going to be happening in the second half of March 2026. But before we dive into the juicy details of, kangaroos, Tasmanian sparkling wine, and wild seafood cruises, hint, 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 these are some of the fun things that we're going to be doing. We are going to have so many fun experiences, and let me tell you why this episode and this trip matter so much. You see, there are wine trips, and then there are wine lovers travel trips. Gail has spent over a decade building a business that defies cookie cutter itineraries and canned tourist stops. Her trips are meticulously curated down to the last sip, the last sunset, and the last toast at a candlelit winery dinner. She blends personal experience with deep industry connections and a massive dose of heart into everything that she plans. I'm really excited to be talking with her today. And I love working with Gail. And that's why I knew that this trip to Australia with her, we share the same philosophy. Travel should be immersive, it should be intentional, it should be inspiring, and it should introduce you to local culture, in my estimation, through the lens of food and wine. And it should surprise you. Travel should surprise you. You should be getting up every day excited about walking out of the hotel, walking out of your Airbnb and saying, wow, I'm going to get to do this thing today. It should be a little magical. In this episode, you're going to hear how Gail has turned her passion for wine and travel into a wildly successful business after leaving the corporate world behind. You'll hear how she created a model that gives travelers access to experiences that they cannot find on their own. Like a private opera performance in Florence, or a behind the scenes visit to Tasmania's Bonarong Wildlife Sanctuary. What? What are you talking about, Nick? Someplace you can literally watch a wombat surgery, while sipping wine. It's a real thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. You're going to get the inside scoop on this tour that we're planning. I can't stress it enough. I'm really excited about this one. We're going to be sparkling wines in Tasmania, the gourmet food scene in Melbourne, beautiful vineyards in Yarra Valley, and that seafood cruise that absolutely redefines fresh. This trip is small, it's exclusive, it's packed with unforgettable experiences for curious sippers and seasoned explorers alike. It's really going to be awesome. And if that's not enough, Gail is only one of 53 premier Aussie or Australia specialists in all of North America. So If you want to go anywhere in Australia, Gail is the person to talk to because she is the expert. And that's why I am hitching my star to her because, she really knows what she's doing. The back roads, the parks, the wineries, everything like a local. And she's also so much fun to talk to, which you're going to be understanding in a minute. So buckle up. Pour yourself something delicious and get ready to swirl, sip, and dream with us. And when you're done listening, don't wait. Head to my website and read a little bit more about your spot on this unforgettable tour. Now, let's jump in to the conversation with the one and only Gail Sherman.
Okay.
All right, Gail, thank you so very much for being on Pour and Explore. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Nick.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I talked a ton about you at the top of the show, so we're just going to dive right in. I need to know what inspired you to blend your love of wine and travel into a business.
Well, I would have to say that I hit a certain point in my life where I got tired of doing what was expected of me, which was to work in the corporate world and, slay dragons. And in my case, it was selling software. I've loved travel for as long as I could remember, from when I was a little girl and wanted to be what was then known as a stewardess. And it never seemed practical to work in travel. And then I hit a point where I said, you know what, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to. And that point was in 2013. And so I decided that I also needed a niche. And I do enjoy wine and food. And when you travel, it's really nice to get a sense of the local culture and the people and the lifestyle by drinking the wine and tasting the food. So I thought, well, that's going to be my niche, wine and travel.
Fantastic. Yeah, obviously two things that are very, very close to my heart. Do you remember, what was it, a moment on a trip that you were taking that you decided that, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Do you recall that particular moment?
Well, I don't know if it was on a trip. Actually, what I remember was that I was determined to work in the travel industry. And on New Year's Day of 2013, I did something I'd never done in my life. I wrote down a New Year's resolution.
Oh.
And I wrote, I'm going to get a job in the travel industry. And I immediately decided to use my networking skills. As I said, I'd been in sales. So I networked with anybody and everybody I could think of who either worked in travel or knew travel. And it took about 6 months. And ultimately, I got a job with American Express Global Business Travel. That started me off. I quickly learned that business travel and leisure travel are two very different animals. And actually, selling business travel wasn't a whole lot different than selling the software that I used to sell. But it gave me the language, it gave me the culture. I got involved in trade organizations. And then about 4 years later, I had an opportunity to get into leisure travel. And it just so happened that the job that I actually created with a company that wasn't quite sure what they were looking for, it was to sell wine travel, but specifically wine cruises. So that's how I got my feet wet.
Again, something that's near and dear to my heart. Absolutely. Your company now that you've been running for quite a while is called Wine Lovers Travel, aptly named, might I say. What makes a trip with you different than your competitors?
The biggest thing is that all of my trips are totally customized. And I don't know of anybody else who does that. There are a number of travel companies, including just your garden variety travel agent, who will find a wine group and they'll book a river cruise with the wine club. And I do have to say that wine cruises are great, but the problem is that there's no customization. You go on the itinerary that the cruise line planned, you do what they have planned, and there's nothing unique about it. What I want to do is to provide a unique experience. And as I tell the wineries who partner with me, the trips are as unique as your wine is. That has really resonated with people because the customization, the personalization is really important. People don't want to do commodity kinds of travel.
Yeah, I mean, people want not only unique experiences, but they want experiences that are not available to the general public. And I think that's an amazing way to go. You know, your itineraries are curated down to the very last detail. What's something that travelers might not realize goes into crafting an experience like you provide?
I don't think they have any idea how much work is involved. As you noted, there's a lot of details, and we do curate down to the detail. And it's like juggling 1,000 balls and putting them all together and making sure that they work. And some people like to travel independently and they say, oh, I can do that by myself. And I say to them, then go ahead and do that. First of all, maybe you could. You'll probably spend dozens or hundreds of hours. I also have access to people and places and experiences that the average person wouldn't have or wouldn't even know to look for. So you can't find something if you don't know what it is that you're looking for. And so I do things like that. As an example, I had a group in Tuscany last year, and part of the trip was in Florence, and we made arrangements to do a private opera performance in Santa Croce, which is a historic building. It was adjacent to the Santa Croce Church. We were just in this magnificent room, small group. My groups are always small. I go typically between 12 and 20 people. This group was about right in the middle, about 15, 16. We sat in this amazing room. We had an opera singer and a pianist. And beforehand, we were served Prosecco and beautiful little bites. And it felt like we were transported back to medieval times. And even though the group, myself included, aren't necessarily opera buffs, just being in that experience, it was just magical.
Yeah, it sounds magical. It sounds amazing. So Italy, obviously as your background snitches on you, you're an Australia buff as well, and you're heading to France in a couple of weeks. You've traveled all over the world. What's been the most surprising wine destination for you?
Well, one destination, and I haven't taken any groups there yet, but it's Mexico.
Mexico, yes.
I don't think that people really think about Mexico producing wine, but they do. And in fact, the oldest winery that is still producing wines that I think dates back to the 1500s was in Mexico. I have a bottle from there, actually. It's back on my credenza over there. But there's a burgeoning wine region in Valle de Guadalupe, which is just outside of Ensenada, not too far from the American border. And I've had some amazing wines from that region, and people just don't associate Mexico with wine.
I'm totally blanking on the name. It starts with an X, the winery you're talking about. And yes, and you're correct. It's been around since like 1582 or say 1587 or something like that. Yeah, 100%. I live an hour away from Guadalupe, and I'm really excited to get down there. I've had tons of wines from that region. And actually, for me, the Mexican wine reminds me a lot of Italian wine. It's very rustic. It's high in acid. It's medium alcohol, and just those beautiful volcanic soils are producing really, really beautiful wines coming out of that region. So I'm excited to get down there. I've got something on the agenda to go maybe summer of next year, so I'm really, really excited about that.
Well, something else that's very cool about that too is I have read a native grape in Valle de Guadalupe is Nebbiolo, which is also the wine of Piemonte or Piedmont in Italy. And people just don't know that. So you're right. It does share a lot of characteristics with the Old World wine. But New World wines, for your listeners, if they don't know, basically North America and Australia and South Africa are all considered New World versus Europe, which is Old World. There are different winemaking styles. And if you were to drink a Nebbiolo from Valle de Guadalupe versus a Nebbiolo from Piedmont, if all else being the same, this wines would still taste different because of the winemaking style, the terroir, and everything else. It's really fascinating to me.
I talk a lot about New World versus Old World on this show, and you're 100% right. just launched a couple of weeks ago was my episode on terroir, where I talk about that exact thing. You can have the same grape from different regions all over the world. They're growing Syrah, for example, pretty much everywhere nowadays. And Syrah from California is going to taste different than Syrah from Mexico, Syrah from Australia, and all of that stuff. So the land, the winemaking practices, the air, the water is all going to make the wine taste different. And
Absolutely.
that's what's so fascinating about wine. I just can't get over it. Absolutely. All right. Well, speaking of Australia, you and I are planning this amazing trip to Australia in March of 2026. And I'm so excited to have this episode come out and have folks hear about it. So I'm just going to let you talk about this amazing trip. We're calling it the Swirl Through Australia Tour. What are some of the highlights for you?
Oh, that's like picking your favorite child, actually. Seriously. Australia is just a remarkable place. I just want to say, just as an overview, the people are friendly, the scenery is spectacular, the wildlife is just so wonderful. I mean, the first time you see a kangaroo hopping in front of your car, you'll go back to being like a little 5-year-old and jumping up and down. You're so excited to see this. Except hopefully you're not jumping up and down while you're driving on the other side of the street, by the way. I don't drive in Australia, actually. I'm a passenger. But I would say we're going to be going to Tasmania as part of this trip. And I was in Tasmania for the first time last December of 2024. And I was blown away. I've traveled now in much of Australia and I love it all, but Tasmania just really took my heart. It's much more quaint than the mainland of Australia. They make some amazing wines. There's a whole region in Tasmania where they make sparkling wine, which is truly as good as anything you'll find in the Champagne region. I loved one of the wildlife sanctuaries there called Bonarong. Bonarong is the wildlife park. And Bonarong is the coolest place because what they do is they have a hospital there for injured animals. And so not only do you get to go there and see animals in a fairly natural habitat, but you can actually watch in the hospital. And if you happen to be there when they're doing surgery on a wombat or a kangaroo or what have you, you can watch and you get a chance to feed the animals. One thing I learned about Tasmania, though, there are no koala in Tasmania. So if you want to see koala, you have to go to the mainland, but we will be, Nick. So don't worry about that. We'll see our koala.
Yes.
The other thing that's really cool about Tasmania that I love, well, two more things, actually. One of the highlights of the trip is we're going to go on what's called a wild seafood cruise. And this is out of Hobart, which is the largest city in Tasmania. And you go out on this boat. I believe it was a catamaran. I'm not a boat expert, but what you do is they have a diver on board and they have a couple of guys. And so you get a chance to eat absolutely the freshest seafood you have ever had. Some of it's raw, some of it's cooked. And once we get out far enough, the diver goes into the water and he brings up whatever he finds, which are often sea urchin. They were like sea snails, actually. They look like, your escargot, except they're about the size of a tennis ball. And they have this kitchen on board. I call it a kitchen, not a galley, because it's as nice as anybody's, stainless steel kitchen that you would have. And they have guys on board, and they were guys in this case, and they cook seafood in every way. And it's a small group, so you're not crowded by a bunch of other people. And you go to a salmon farm, and salmon are not indigenous, but they've caught salmon and they do breed them there. So you get to have fresh salmon, fresh oysters. The oysters, if you like oysters, they're the best of the world. It's just really, really fun. And of course, they serve wine and beer. And you're out there for about half a day, and it was really fun. Another thing that was really cool that I love is now it's Marilla. And Marilla has both a museum and a winery. And the museum is called MONA, which stands for the Museum of Old and New Arts. And if you think, oh, what a snoozer to go to a museum, you haven't been to this museum. The gentleman who founded it, whose name is, I'm not remembering right now, but he was a math genius. He's from Tasmania. And he figured out how to count cards. And so he went into casinos, and until he got kicked out, he made so much money. I mean, more money than you could ever imagine. And I guess he was an art aficionado. So he started collecting this very eclectic art. Very little of it you would know the names of the artists, but everything from paintings to sculptures to videos to interactive stuff. And he decided to build a museum there because that part of Tasmania, I don't know if you would say it was poverty, but people certainly, there was a downturn in the economy, and he wanted to give back to where he had grown up. And so he built this really cool museum, and adjacent to the museum is a winery that was going down the tubes. And ironically, the person who owned the winery went bankrupt because he had a gambling problem. So the irony, one guy builds this because he made all this money gambling. The other guy lost it because he obviously didn't know how to count cards. But anyhow, you go to this, and we're going to go both to the museum and the winery and have lunch there. And in Marilla, they make really lovely wines. And just the whole experience, it's like something that you'll always remember because there's nothing like it in the world.
I love the fact that you chose, Tasmania as a highlight. That's absolutely going to be a highlight for me as well. I'm really, really excited about going to Hobart and seeing Tasmania. And I love the fact that you've touched on some of the other things, that we're going to be doing as well. This is not, your grandma's wine tour, where we're just bouncing around from winery to winery to winery. We are really going to see the culture and meet the people of Australia. And I was really excited about that being part of this excursion, not only for us, but for our guests as well. We're going to be going through Yarra Valley, the Mornington Peninsula. I mean, we're going to jam-pack so much into this trip. By the time we get home, we're going to need another vacation. So I'm really, really excited about it. Absolutely.
But it will be totally worth it. One thing I want to say, you asked me earlier what makes my trips different. And I think another thing that's really important is that I design trips to places that I have been. And I think that's really important because as I'm putting together these trips, and I develop relationships with local partners, for example, in Australia or France or Italy or wherever it is, I make sure that I've been there and I've done a lot of these experiences, and I can talk from the heart, and I can tell you the stories, and I can paint a picture for you. Because a lot of people in the travel world are just order takers. You want to go to Hawaii, here, I'll book you a hotel. You want to go on this cruise, here, we'll book you on whatever. I don't do that. I feel like I have to share my personal experiences. And also the trips that I put together are the trips that I would want to take, or that, people that I know would want to take. And so if there's something in there that doesn't resonate with me, then we don't do it. And if there's something that we need to include, then I make sure that it's part of it. And then, as you know, when we put together this itinerary, I partnered closely with you, and we added things that were important to you. And you're going to be conducting a lot of educational sessions of that nature. And that's important too, because this isn't just a trip out of a catalog. It is Nick's trip. It's the wine guy trip, and never to be repeated unless you want to do it a second time. And even then we'll vary it. This will be a once in a lifetime trip.
Oh, I'm so excited about it, and I'm so excited to be going to Australia. And I can't say enough about my experience working with you. From the day we met, I knew that this was going to be a match made in heaven. The amazing relationship that you have with the people down in Australia and in Tasmania, and we got a chance to talk to one another and really dive deep into putting this together, and going back and forth and making sure that it worked, and every little detail has been planned out. So I'm so excited to be partnering with you on this 100%. In addition to, being a travel expert, after all of these years in the business, you're a wine expert as well. I believe you have we said one or two. Absolutely. So, wine on top of it. And I love, that about you as well. So when you are finding places to go, you're not only doing it from a travel expert perspective, but you're doing it from a wine expert perspective as well. And I think that's super important, when we're talking about flying all the way to the other side of the world. It's important that we have that expertise. Australia has such a unique wine scene. What should people know about Australian wine that might surprise them?
Well, I don't know that Americans in general really think about Australia as a wine producer. There have been a few brands that have made their way into, popular culture. I think a lot of people might know Yellowtail, which is a very inexpensive wine. They might know Penfolds, which is one of the historic labels. But I don't know that they really understand how prevalent wine is throughout Australia. The main wine producing region is South Australia, and that's where you can find the Shiraz, or what we know as Syrah. And sometimes they're starting to call it Syrah, which is interesting, but mostly it's Shiraz. I don't think that people think of Australia as being a place where they make sparkling wine. I don't think that people really think about Australia with wine. I think when people think about Australia, they think about Sydney, they think about Melbourne, they think about, going to the Great Barrier Reef. Maybe they think about kangaroos, but I think that's about it. So going to Australia from a wine perspective is great. And another thing that's surprising is the quality of the food, which I think would rival the best of anything in New York or San Francisco or Paris. They are very into their food. The whole farm to table thing, it's even closer than that. And the way they present food. I was at the airport in Melbourne last year coming home, and I hadn't had a chance to eat breakfast before the long flight home. And I went into the airport cafe and ordered some eggs and toast. I mean, that's no big deal. The way they presented it was just beautiful on the plate. I mean, I took a picture of it, and they take their food seriously. They take their coffee very seriously. Coffee is a huge deal. I know people think of Australia and beer, but coffee is huge there. And there might be a handful of Starbucks, but nobody goes to them. They're all independent coffee shops, and they pride themselves on their coffee.
Yeah, the food scene, from what I've heard in Sydney and Melbourne, are just absolutely out of this world. And as you said, rival some of the other, great large cities around our country, Paris, Milan, etc. And Adelaide in South Australia. I even understand there's a thriving food scene in Perth as well. So there's a lot of really amazing things that we're going to see on the trip. And I would also point out, if anyone who's listening is interested in coming on the tour, all of the links are absolutely going to be in the show notes. So, make sure you're checking that out. Reach out to Gail and get more information. Reach out to me and get more information. You can hit me up on my website as well. But, what I love to do when I do these tours is I love to stay either a little chunk of time before or a little chunk of time after as well, so we can travel around on our own. Now we're going to be flying into Sydney, so doing, a few days in Sydney before we start the tour would be a lot of fun. I definitely want to do that. My wife and I are probably going to stay a few days on the back end before we head back to the States. So that is always an option with a tour like that. And Gail would be happy to talk a little bit more about extending your stay after our tour. Is there anything else that you think we missed about the Swirl Through Australia tour? Anything else you want to let the listeners know about?
I think we've covered the high points. I sort of want to expand on what you just said with before and after, because, Australia is a huge country. It's about the land size of the United States. Not quite, but almost. And it almost is, generally speaking, sort of shaped like the United States.
Yep.
So from one end to the other, it's like going from, New York to Los Angeles. And if you are going to extend, there's more than one wine region not too far from Sydney. One is called the Hunter Valley, which makes some lovely wines. There's also some smaller regions. One's called Orange. It's up in the mountains near there. Probably not as great of wines as you'll find in the places that we're going, but there's beautiful scenery. The other thing, and boy, I would love to do this, and I have to admit I have not been there, but if anybody wants to take a trip and go west to Perth, now actually I have been in Perth, and Perth is just a lovely, lovely city. And there is an area just outside of Perth called Swan Valley, which makes mostly whites, as I recall. But if you go about 3 hours south, and you tell Nick or me you want to do this, we will be on it to go to Margaret River. And Margaret River, I've had their wines. They are the main producer of Cabernets in Australia, and just incredible wines. I think one of the brands that you'll see sometimes in the US is called Lewin, Leuwin, I believe, but there's lots more. And Western Australia is quite a surprise. It's very isolated from the rest of the country. I mean, the closest other place you would go would be like Bali or Singapore. I mean, you're that far out. And then, of course, South Australia. We're not going to be able to hit on that on this trip, but South Australia, which is names you may have heard like Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, they make some really nice wines, and it's beautiful as well. So I could go on and on about Australia. I was so excited when I started my company. I started studying Australia. I became a Aussie specialist with Tourism Australia, which is their tourist board. And as a result, I studied more and got more people there. And I am one of only 53 premier Aussie specialists in all of North America. And I'm very proud of that. So I'm proud that I'm promoting this wonderful, wonderful country. And I'm really happy that you're doing it with me, Nick. And I just can't wait.
You should be proud, and I'm excited to be a part of it and to be working on this trip with you. Thank you so very, very much. All right, let's jump into our lightning round. I did my first lightning round a couple weeks ago, and just a fun rapid fire way to wrap things up. If you could plan a wine trip for your younger self, where would you go and why?
I might go to the country of Georgia, which is apparently the birthplace of wine. And it's a little challenging because of all the political upheaval in the world, but I think it would be fascinating.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. What's always in your carry-on when you're heading on a wine trip?
Wine bags, so I can bring home wine with me.
Yeah.
Seriously. What else is with me? My headset, my Kindle, my computer, change of clothes.
That's a good idea.
Medicines.
All right. And finish this sentence for me, Gail. Wine travel should always feel like blank.
Magic.
Fantastic. Well, you heard it from Gail Sherman, everyone. Wine travel should feel and absolutely feels like magic. Gail, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I'm so excited about the Swirl Through Australia tour with you. March of 2026, everybody, put it on your calendar. Thank you so much. And there you have it, guys. My incredible chat with Gail Sherman from Wine Lovers Travel. Isn't she just a total force of nature? She's absolutely wonderful, and I'm so lucky to be partnering with her on what will hopefully not be our last trip together. So, from the vineyards of Tuscany to seafood cruises in Tasmania, Gail really does curate experiences that aren't just memorable, they are transformational. And I really, really hope you will look her up. You're going to find her information down the bottom there in the show notes. So please head on over there and check her out. The Swirl Through Australia tour is shaping up to be the most immersive, delicious, and downright magical trip that I've ever been a part of. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This is not your average group tour. It's personal, it's bespoke, it's overflowing with wine, food, culture, wildlife, and of course, meaningful connection, which is what I'm always striving for. And it's being co hosted by yours truly. That's me. What we're going to be talking about during the trip is sparkling wine in Tasmania, feeding kangaroos at a wildlife rescue park, exclusive vineyard tastings in Yarra, Mornington Peninsula. Really, really cool. I'm excited about that. That seafood catamaran tour outside of Tasmania, Hobart, Tasmania, art museums, farm to table meals, and of course, so much more. So here's the deal. This tour does have a limited amount of guests, so if it's something that you're interested in, you want to get over to the website right now. Go to thewineguy.vin, thewineguy.vin, and check it out. There's a direct link to Gail's website there, and she will be able to get you all of the information that you need to reserve your spot before it's gone. So let's raise a glass together in Australia, March 2026. I cannot wait to travel with you and with Gail, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, hit that follow button, leave a review, and if you would share it with a fellow wine lover or travel buddy, I would be eternally grateful. Until next time, everybody, let's head down under and keep wondering and keep wondering. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.